Good afternoon, everybody. I see some of you. I don't see most of you, but thank you for joining us this evening for conversation comme Serralves. Tonight, I'm very happy that to be in conversation with the artist Carlos Bunga. As you may know, Carlos, if you don't mind, sharing your age, Carlos was born in 1976 in Porto. Now lives in Barcelona, and over the last few years, I had a great privilege to see some of his works internationally. I remember dearly I think it was maybe the first piece really that I've seen, Carlos. It was at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. But Carlos had has already a long career for his young age, including actually in 2012 a wonderful installation at Serralves as part of the Sonai Serralves project. Carlos was also received the EDP award more recently. Carlos had a wonderful exhibition in London at the Whitechapel Gallery, at MAT in Lisbon, at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Canada, in Toronto. So pretty a lot of hours in the plane, I would say. Chicken or pasta, a lot of that, I'm sure you've heard. Carlos' work.
Good memories in this context. A lot of trips in the plane.
Your work, and we will talk a lot about that, of course, touch on the notion of homes, of domesticity, and at a moment when a lot of us, and you, of course, have been spending a lot of hours, I'm sure, at home, might have, the last few months might have also affected your notion of domesticity, home, and shelter. But of course, the work is not only that. It's actually a very rigorous contemplation of the role of architecture, urban planning, the role of painting, the role of sculpture, the place of the body, and also through a very, and I would leave you, of course, Carlos, talk about that, a very, very rigorous selection of material for your work, deep reflection on nomadism, on adversity, on what people need to make a living, to survive, what it means to be in the margin. And I mention adversity because I also remember a beautiful exhibition that was centered around an artist that I'm sure you're interested in, Elio Tisica, and the title was In Adversity We Live. And I think this notion is very much at the center of your work. I'm just going to read one quote that you sent me actually a few days ago, if you don't mind, because it's when I read it, first I was very moved by this quote, because it also shows this word that I'm about to read shows the profound humanity in your work. And when I look at your work, it's also something that I think many people come out of the work with, this sense of empathy and humanity. So I'm going to read that, and then you can react to my presentation and say I'm wrong. This is it's wrong, and then we have prepared. It's a bit of a studio visit. It's an overdue studio visit that happened with an interface, but it's a bit considered a studio visit, so that I will learn, and I'm very selfish about the work, and all our viewer will learn about your work. This is a quote that you sent me a few days ago. I'm reading. My house has no doors or windows, no stairs or yard, no ceiling or rooms, no tables or cupboards, no chairs or paintings. My house is the people I love. So, Carlos, maybe we can send the first image, and I open, of course, the conversation to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Philippe, for this beautiful introduction. Thank you, Serralves, to give this opportunity to be here to talk about my work. For me, it's very emotional moment because I'm from Portugal, and it's great to have this voice to talk about my work. I want to start with this image, but first I want to say that I believe that the personal experience influence the way we see and are in the world. Also, this experience marks the difference between what we are and want to be. These works calls nomad. I spent a large of part of my life living in several houses, traveling from one place to another. I learned to adapt and found my place in these transitory places. And I really feel a nomad in my practice and in a way I think. Everything can be moved and transformed. This drawing I did in 2006. I was in New York with a grant. New York is a very intense city, a lot of energy, and in that moment and after to be living in different houses, I did this drawing that have that perception that someone is walking, and the drawing of this house is one of the houses where I've been living when I was a kid.
I mean, the notion of nomad, in the research and the reading I have done around you, goes beyond, I think, your nomadism as an artist. I think you also it's really part of your DNA that you were born a nomad.
Exactly. I think yes. I think this idea about nomadic, it's very powerful concept, and it's very interesting if we connect with today's society. If you want to talk about that, but sometimes in my case, when I talk about nomadic, sometimes not is only about the physicality of to move to one place or another. Is this idea that you could be nomad in the way you think, in the way you look for the objects or for the reality, and that it's very important. And in your sentence, that sentence that I sent to you, the people that I love, I really think that sometimes when we talk about space, architecture, buildings, always we talk about physical objects. And I'm very interested in this mental space and this idea that maybe the space is the space without walls, and maybe the essence of the space that maybe we're looking for is about love. The people that we love and the people that we want. That is the house where we feel comfortable and we feel protected.
Maybe we can go to the next image that also relate to what you said, but I think with another layer, which is your own autobiography.
Yes, this is the title of this drawing is my first house was a woman. The house has a concept. It has always been present in my work. About this drawing, I want to say that in 1975, among the many displaced fugitives and persecuted people by the armed conflict of Angola independence with Portugal, my mother, a few months pregnant, was trying to escape the war to save my 2 years old sister. She never met anyone of her family again. And the dramatic and violent situation in the altered space contrasted with the protected space of the belly. this space of protection was my first house. Also, I think the belly is the first house of everyone, every people. Is the space where we start to grow up with a very fragile form, and the belly of the woman protect us of the space outside. Also in this drawing, I have these little houses like an African house, and I've been in Africa, but I try to make this metaphor of this little house, very fragile, and this body with this belly with someone inside.
For me, there is also something in this drawing and collage, because the way you do it, I think it's there on translucent paper, superposed with each other, but you also have this image of that says Portugal colonial. So it's also something that we will see as we talk, which is very present in your work. There is first an historical awareness in the work, a political awareness, which is not didactic, but more poetic.
I think in some time for many years, I try don't talk too much about my personal life. Actually, in 2003, when I win the EDP prize in Serralves, the people in Portugal tried to connect my work with homeless and this kind of universe. That for me not is the problem, but I mean that moment was thinking that the work have a lot many kind of different steps, not only that connections. And for many years I try not to put visible this kind of personal experience, but with the time I think was so amazing to try to understand that part of my work, of that my life, because I think the life of our life and our experience of life and the work that we're doing, everything is connected. And in some point in the inconscient way or very conscient way, this childhood or this experience of this when we are a kid being is a kind of active manifest. Also, if that is in an inconscient way.
Let's go to the next image too, because we won't talk too much about your childhood, as you say, but I wanted, when I saw these images, for me it was impossible not to make a connection with this drawing by Louise Bourgeois. And I'm so curious to hear, and we'll do that, throughout this presentation, where I inserted in your images some visitors, like Louise Bourgeois. Of course, there is a connection here. She approaches it in a different manner. But I'm curious to maybe hear from you, how do you see these images, and if you see some connection. Of course, Louise Bourgeois had a very conflicted relationship with her first house, her mother, as well as her father, and as well as her house. It was more space in her mind of constraint and alienation than the way you describe the house.
Exactly. No, totally. I remember when I start to make my nomads, this body with I put these houses, right? And some people start to talk about Louis Bourgeois, this kind of words. And then I start to look for Louis Bourgeois. I say, whoa, this looks amazing. So amazing connection with what I'm doing in the different approach. But Louis Bourgeois is very great because she have also this problematic relation with his mother. Also, this is a female house, I think, no? A female, the title of this work is like a female house.
Femme maison.
Okay, femme maison, okay, here. It's very great. I think it's a kind of a reivindication about the female, its possession, right? And for me, I think also this work is really, really beautiful. And also I feel connections with this work because this kind of works, also my nomadism and Louis Bourgeois, what for me it's so interesting is this monumentality that normally we have in our houses. Is, I think the buildings always give that sensation that is monumental and strong, and we are fragile. In this kind of drawings, that the fragility of the body and this prolongation with the human body, with the buildings, is connected. And now, and here was not only about the building or the architecture, we talk more about life, we talk about more this ephemerality, and maybe we talk about this idea, the house that we can walk. And I think it's really about a mental idea. When we can project our traumas, I really think it's beautiful, this idea that in the art world, sometimes we have problems to talk or to project some traumas that we have. But if we are that capacity to make this confrontation with things that we have inside, I think we grow up and we feel more strong, confidence, and more solid point of view when we are in the wars. And this of Louis Bourgeois, I really think it's beautiful, and I really think I have a lot of connections with this.
I hope we could actually. I wished we could have this conversation in person at Serralves, because we actually have right now this beautiful Louis Bourgeois exhibition on view. So I hope you'll be able to see it. Let's go, because there is also some for me. Yeah, let's go to this place of fragility, as you say, and the question of architecture, but a very specific type of architecture, which is on display here with this work. Tell us about the work. I feel it's a house.
Yes, this is my house. Actually, this is so far the most realistic model that I did until now.
Mhm.
The other ones that I make, it's very abstract, but it's very realistic. This is the social house where I've been living. In 1983, the Portuguese government built several houses in a small municipality in Portugal for poorest Portuguese people.
Mhm.
These social houses was built with the prefabricated materials, and was very fragile, because the materials, these prefabricated, it's very fragile material. I've been live here 8 or 10 years in this house, and in 2002 I returned to this house to see how the municipality collapsed these houses, put down these houses, and because that I've been there, I take pictures, I make a video, and I have that feeling that was so important to preserve the story, that little story of these houses. In some point, when you look of the story, always what's been present in the story is the power, the center, and all these little stories, these little fragilities. I think it's very important to be in the story in some point, or to be present. And for me, to make this model was to activate, or to make a record about my memories and the memories about these houses. Some years, 1 year ago, I've been in a municipality, tried to find information about this house, and it was unbelievable that anybody knows what houses was this.
Mhm.
Any information, only the people who been living this neighborhood or this model give you this reality, or can talk about this reality. If not, this will be a very big absence story in
Mhm.
a big absence story.
But there is, I mean, I wonder, of course, if it's something you had in mind, because I'm new to Portugal and I'm new to Porto, and so I'm learning, as I go. But the more I stay in Portugal, I understand that there is also a very deep post-revolution in Portugal, a very deep tradition that actually Serralves talked about in an exhibition around the Sahel movement from post-revolution, with I think it was called the local ambulatory support services, to build actually affordable houses, like you found in many other in other countries at different moment of time. So was it something like, because you were living in Porto, this history, was it present in your mind when you were doing these works?
No, this is I did in a very intuitive way.
Mhm.
Actually, the exhibition in Serralves, the Sal exhibition,
Mhm.
I've been there. I saw the exhibition, I have, for that exhibition, always I feel that this exhibition talks about social houses, but in some point was more about the architects than of that reality, you know, because the
Okay.
point is the architects make all these projects, social projects, for talk about this reality, and the exhibition try to talk about this social reality. But in some point, the architects are the protagonists of that reality. But it's interesting for me that Portugal, in that exhibition, I really learned that in Portugal I have so many different realities about this social context. And for me, one of the stories in this exhibition that was so amazing was the Índios da Meia Praia, this little village in Algarve. That was for me was a very impressive story about that people in the Meia Praia exhibition. But that exhibition for me was very contradictory because I really feel that the architects was the point of view, and the second was the social issue of the people.
And just because I also want to hear about the way you work, like as a practitioner, it's a box. So you work. It's a shoebox.
This
Yeah.
I did for the cereal box, yes,
Cereal
box,
box.
yes, and then I paint with exactly. I did it very precise, the same color, the windows, the glasses is broke. Try to be very detailed about this house. It was several houses together, and this was the number 17. That was my house, and. This moment it's very difficult to find information about these houses, and these houses not exist more.
Let's go to the next images because I think it relates. I think to the. I mean, this drawing cracks me up. That really put a smile on my face. But also, I think it's. I don't take it as a joke. Actually, I think it's exactly what you said when you describe the Salle exhibition. That I think if I look at the work, and we'll see more of that, I think you have a critical relationship to architecture, and in this drawing, it's. I mean, it also shows your sense of humor.
Yes, I mean, I have a very critical or not so comfortable relation with the architecture. Some point, I think the architects and the people, how when we look for the architects, we have the sensation that they are like gods, okay, because they create spaces where we interact. The idea of living in a box already built where we can only decorate and hang or things is no longer enough and seems to make less and less sense. The concept of architecture still remain very academic, my point of view. I'm very interested in the temporal, emotional, and intuitive aspect of space, and where the imposing of architecture may exist as experimentation in some points. Architecture has the ability to influence and mold our brains so that we can believe in a utopia invented, which became an integral part of our sense. It has had a great impact in the mind of people, creating a kind of a existential crisis between fiction and reality. You know? And the architecture, I think, is really like a model, a kind of a model that we can manipulate and mold. Okay, as part of it, I think we are very vulnerable in some points in that space. Also, it had people in our houses or in the buildings or in the cities, buildings transform in a kind of ghost spaces. What that means, people activate the spaces. It had people who have these ghost spaces. In this COVID pandemic, with this lockdown and we are at home, actually we have that sensation, the ghost city were there and we are arrested inside of our houses. And in that moment, maybe we are more conscious about our space, and we have a lot of problems because we feel we are really like to live in a kind of prison if we want to talk about this, about that. And I really think this pandemic, for example, make questions about the future of our cities, or coexistence, sociability, or isolation. And the idea of God's architects needs to change in some points. And in this drawing is like a kind of a joke. Of course, it's something very a little humor, but it's really, well, the way to express that critical situation about architecture.
It's a little bit like, what Marcel Duchamp said when he arrived to America. Not that he was a god, but people thought he was a star. He said, no, I'm not a star. I'm a shooting star, but my tail is in front of me. So that's the concept of star architect here, but with the tail in front. What was also making me put a smile on my face when I received this drawing, because this week in the New York Times, there's a long article about one of the major problems in American civilization is the lack of public urinals, which the new administration should solve. Let's go to the next image. Diana, okay. So, you were talking about being involved in the real, not in the theoretical architecture or the academic architecture, but really having being interested in confronting yourself with the reality of life in a urban center. So. This image here is bring also another dimension of your work, which is the performance. So tell us what's happening here. There are many elements, but I would like, I can second guess, but I would rather have you tell what it is.
I study in Caldas da Rainha. I study painting. Always, I think the way I think, the way I work, the way I look the reality, if you want to talk about that, is really a kind of a painting point of view. In this moment, I did this performance before start to use cardboard and to make these installations. I'm in the school, I'm a student. I work with painting canvas. I did small paintings, big paintings, but I feel all the time a very big frustration with the bidimensionality of the painting. That was very hard for me. On some time, I feel a very big attraction for the old buildings who collapse, the traces of that buildings around of the city. That was kind of a magic sensation when I look for these kind of buildings that I found around. Then I start to look for newspapers who talks in Portugal about the buildings who collapse. I remember some years ago the accident in Entre Rios, this bridge to collapse and die a lot of people. And these traces in the buildings for me was a kind of a beautiful paintings in a real space, full of energy, full of memory, full of stories, in contact with the real people, totally different with these paintings in the studio, right? And then I start to take some of my paintings, walk with that paintings from the city, around of the city, try to find this kind of buildings, and I hang these paintings in these buildings, in these traces of the buildings. I hang the paintings, and then I take pictures. I watch the painting in that space, and that's how the painting was contextualized with this space. In that moment, I'm very surprised because I give that performance, give the sensation or that perception about the space for the first time at some point. And another point, my paintings in these walls, the painting, I have the feeling that the painting was invisible. In some point, it's like the reverse gesture with the ready-made. But the ready-made is the species, the object that we take for the real space and we make in the white cube, if you want to talk about that, and we isolate that space. And in my case, this performance was the reverse, to contextualize these paintings in the real space that is very close. And that in some point was like invisible. And that was so surprised for me. Like, what? The painting was not the painting that I bring with me, but all the space is the painting. And that was a very big change in my perception about space, about memory, about ruins. And then I have a very big problem that how I can work with this universe, what I can doing. And same time, in that moment, I found Gordon Mata Clark, that I've been in shock when I found Gordon Mata Clark. I stopped it. I stopped working. I totally think that Gordon Mata Clark did make what I'm looking for at some point. And then I started Guatemala Clark. Guatemala Clark, it's architects, you know. He knows very well how to cut a building, you know, and that makes a very big difference. And also, he worked with the real buildings. And after this performance, I have that perception that the point of view here was not to work with the real space, because I feel very frustrated with try to think. And then I decided in a very intuitive way to take plastics, papers, cardboard that I found in the street and start to make a little houses, always in a very abstract way. No windows, no doors. I try to be very sculptural in some, but with a very fragile and simple materials. And after that, after make these little models, I decided with the same material to make my first cardboard construction in the corridor of my school, my university, and where I did the first one because I want to make the same of the spaces that I found outside was to make a buildings, to cut, to collapse, and get these traces or these marks on the space. I really think that gesture is very powerful. The gesture of traces, the gestures of to talk about memories, yes, and these images, this performance, pictorial performance, is this performance. Yes, is the performance that I'm with my paintings, and this is very beautiful because it's just before I start to work with cardboard and start to make my such specific installations that have connections with these walls, city, ruins, and buildings who collapse.
Let's go to the next image because I will go back to Mata Clark, but I couldn't resist to show that first because for me it's a fundamental image of the last century. I think it's one of the most important work of late 20th century art, and it relates a lot to what you say. And of course, I don't think we can look at sculpture right now or painting without thinking of someone like David Hemmons nowadays. I think what he has done is incredible. But this image for me, beside the fact of an artist or someone being in the street as you were, or in front of a building or in a building, but there is something that that you mentioned, which is for me connect a little bit what you were doing, and it was 20 years ago, 2002, when you were doing that. You were extremely young, but you mentioned the word invisible, and I think when I look at this performance by David Emmons, what he was doing too, besides the fact that confronting his work to an audience which was not an art audience by selling snowballs in the street, was to also frame or point the finger towards people that are invisible, that the street vendors that we don't see anymore, that we can have the choice to ignore. And looking at this image, actually, I was not thinking of that, but now listening to you, I actually think you're less interested in David Hemmons here than you're interested in the man next to him, who nobody knows because he's truly invisible. Nobody has ever mentioned anything about this man who has been in this photo, which is an icon. But what he's doing here with his little box, it's also for me something that I think you have learned from. Like the solution that people find in very vernacular decision that push you through everyday life. Is Hemmons has something that, I mean, that you looked at and has been of some importance for you?
I mean, this work is really amazing. You know, this is the snowballs, right?
Yeah.
I think he and the other guy, and I think have more people. I think this is in New York.
Yeah.
This Neighborhood. And the other people, the other guy and the other ones that don't is in the picture, they sell some foods and objects, whatever. And it's quite normal, right? Like that you can ignore, but you can accept. But what you can think of someone that can sell to you a snowball? For sure, we don't know. You don't go only to ignore it, but call to say that his guy is crazy. I don't know how much he sell for the balls or if he gift to the balls to the people.
No, they were
but
selling them.
It's really amazing gesture about the invisibility. The invisibility and this metaphor, the invisibility about the ball, but also about these people in this neighborhood. It's like this connection about this invisibility, about, in connected with this ignorance that the people can cross and don't want to see or don't look. Or he can give or he can sell you a snowball that of course you go to ignore, or maybe you go to see that it's great and you go to accept, but this go to be invisible and go away. In some point, this absence, this idea that things was not always so physical, it's something that only exist in some moment. It's very poetic and very beautiful, and for me, in some point, really have this connection with this sensation that I have with the paintings in the walls, because that paintings is the same. We have these walls, the painting is contextualized with these walls, and this being invisible. That I think it's really, really, really amazing. Actually, he was not so famous here, I think.
No, not yet.
I think anybody knows him. what reinforced this idea about invisibility, because now it will be totally different because the art world will be there. But in this case, I think it's really poetical, and I really think it's really important that we can start to talk about things that was not logical, things that was not only about materiality, because in some point we miss some reality, some perception, some sensibilities that in some point not look sense, but they are so important for life and for we understand other perspectives about our life, about objects, and about other things. And I really think this is a very amazing performance that I really feel close.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, so you were talking about that just before, about this model that you're doing as minimal, with no pun on minimalism yet, as possible.
Yeah, this it's very interesting. When I win the EDP prize, the people start to talk about me because I'm a student. When I've been in the EDP prize, the people in Portugal, because I win the prize, start to talk with me and start to connect me with these very peripheral realities. And in this work, I really try to if this model is only cardboards, you have one perception. But I paint in a very proposal way to see, to transform this object in a more sculptural, the kind of a sculptural idea, perception. And always also in my such specific installations, always I try not to make a presentation about reality, but it's more one interpretation where always the abstraction is present. And some point, is this a way of working that you can manipulate one object from reality? You can identify because you can say, this looks a model, but you don't know what kind of model is this. Also, you don't know if this is a house, a building, it's something in between. And this idea about in between is something that I really love and also make connection with these nomadic concepts. But always this something in between is something that you don't see very well what it is. And always in my practice, this idea about in between something, that tension normally many times is present in all my works. And this specific about this model, for me it's very beautiful to look for this model because it's the beginning of my work. I mean, I did these models before to make the big installations. And in these models, when I start to make these models, I get one question, a very, very important questions. I start to make questions about architect models. The architect models was a prototype, right? It's a projection of one idea, right? You can see this idea. When you see this idea, you go to make the real buildings. But for me, what's more interesting to put emphasis in the concept about the model is a projection of one idea, is one possibility, and I try to use these concepts for the big installations. My big installation is a kind of a big model, one by one, and it's not like a real space, but it is a kind of a big model. And another thing for me, what is interesting in this kind of object or this model is what could to happen if we can walk inside of a model. I mean, with this concept, the projection of one possibility is really a kind of a mental space. In the point, what we talk here is this mental space full of possibilities.
Let's go to the next one too. Yeah, because there is also, I mean, it's the same logic, but here, I mean, you introduce a new element, and that's also what I really admire about your work is there is a progression, a very systematic progression, an expansion actually, where the space between each work follows a very thoughtful process from the material, everything you described so far, the way you use the white paint, the way you use domesticity, and then the way you're going to move to, and we'll see that later, more monumental installation, but really built on this progression in the work. And here you introduce a new element, which is for me, that will come back again in your work, the notion of, well, furniture, a seat, a chair, that you neutralize.
I think, because the situation that we live today with this pandemic, I really think, and because architecture, I really think the question and maybe the most powerful concept today for for everyone, maybe was not the building or maybe was not our houses, but I really think is the furniture. In this moment, we start to move our houses. We're the building, but we move the table. We spend more time that. But the furniture have a very big is a kind of a very big protagonist in some points. I like to act on objects by by modifying them. How does intervention allow me to create fissures in their story, identity, or functionality? When I intervene in these pieces, I feel as if I am extending my body through my hands into the object so as to confront or resist preconceived ideas about its nature. When I start this idea or this object we have here, I love the idea that this intervention in this chair, I love the idea that I can take, for one point, take the functionality of that chair with this construction, we create a new reality. We, in this point of view now, we don't know what kind of object is that. It's a chair, it's a sculpture. How we can deal with this new reality in some points, you know, and total different materials. And for me, it's important that that connection, that appropriation about that story and about that reality. And I really think, for example, the big installations, I have this intervention in the big spaces in the architecture, and here is to make this intervention in the domestic space, the space inside, the space where we live. And another thing that I really think is very powerful in the domestic objects is always we have that sensation that these objects, you have that presence of the body, you know, that absence always is there. A chair, you know, is for seats. You know, a bed, you know, is for to sleep. But you don't need to be there because you identify it, that object give that suggestion to you. And in this case, this sculptor really loved the idea to take the functionality and to transform this object in another reality with another form and objective.
Let's go to the next one, which I think is a terrible example. I should have never put this thing. It's really to show the difference between art, which is about ideas, and design. I'm gonna make enemies with design, even though I love drug design. But I was thinking of the way you work with sustainability and using things that have a life, that have a DNA narrative involved with this object, which is the opposite of you. It's not about ideas, actually. It's using existing functional object and reinforce their functionality. So we should not talk about that. Sorry?
No, totally. I think in this case, it's like to use the same kind of objects to put in different configuration, but the functionality needs to be there. I mean, the functionality still there with another form, but the proposal for the object still there, right?
And fetishized. Let's go to the next one, which is more. I think I want to hear you about this one, which is again, you know,
Wow. Joseph Beuys.
it's not too bad.
Wow.
The bar is high. Sorry, I put you in the pantheon.
Wow, that is another story. Yeah, here I think Joseph Beuys makes something more close to what I'm looking for at some point, because that functionality not exist. I think this chair was not comfortable, was not a place that you can sit. It's a object that was not comfortable when we look for that object in some point, because the chair is comfortable. And in that sense, I think Joseph Beuys, I mean, how I'm working goes more close to the gesture of Joseph Beuys when I look for these objects. And this is inside of a vitrine, right?
It's inside of a vitrine, yeah.
A vitrine, okay.
And with time, the fat kind of went away.
Yeah, but no, I don't know. I think that was not mine. It's a left voice, but looks beautiful. This is Sarah, the material.
No, so the material on the chair is fat.
Ah, it's fat. Okay.
It's fat, so he neutralized. He used the fat because of his own personal life, that he was covered in fat during the war to be saved after his plane crashed. But what I was interested in this notion of the chair that you have, and we will see again, is like the house, like the body, which is the house. That why the chair, why you're interested in the chair, why other artists have been interested in the chair, because the chair is actually, you engage with the world, I think, with a chair. Like you sit, you meet, you work, you eat on a chair, and that's like the house. The chair create this sense of community.
No, and I think that perception about the share is very, very pertinent in this context. The context that we spend so many hours, days, weeks, months in our home, you know, our relation with the furniture change, I think, you know, and that this object, in that sense, the chair, and also the bed, that the bed not is the space only for to sleep. We sit, we read, we have with a computer. I mean, it's more than a bed in this moment, and our house is more than a house. Our house is an office, then a space for conversation, whatever. But yeah, but this looks amazing.
Let's change scale. I think the next image you're expanding. I'm curious about. I don't know much about this one, so I know that I mean, no, actually, I don't know much. Coursal, I think, is the notion of a public space, but I'm interested here in. I think you anticipate things here, which is for me the notion of first the expansion of the material, cardboard that will come over and over again, but also this thin line between what's, I don't know if it's falling apart or if it's being built.
Listen, after EDP prize, always also EDP prize. Marta Kuzman was in the jury. She was the curator for the Biennale Manifesta 5 in next year in 2004. She invited to the Biennale, and she gave him this space. This building is from this very famous Spanish architect Rafael Moneo, and Marta and Massimiliano Gioni. They give me this space to build a building. I built all this construction. I spent a month in this museum, Cubo Cursal. The title of this piece is from the name of the building. I've been about 1 month working the space. And here I can talk a little bit about my process. I mean, normally I travel normally the curators invite me. I have my first trip to see the space, then I return at home, and then I come back to make the projects. And the base was not about drawings, models, it's more about the concept with some ideas. And it's really a work process. When I work in the space, is my studio, is a space of exhibition, and I need to take all the decisions when I make this construction. I spend about 4 weeks to build this construction with another person, and sometimes almost alone. And then in the middle of the process, I decided, I said to the curators that I want to make a performance in the day of the opening. Okay. In that moment, some people say that I'm a little bit crazy because the people don't understand why someone could work for about 1 month in a very hard way, so many hours to build this huge construction. And in the day of the opening, I decided to collapse. In some point, this was not a logical decision or a logical thinking about how the things works. Also, no drawings. And then I decided to make the performance on the day of the opening because I justify to the curators, the people, that this work have this concept in some point about metamorphosis, transforms in another thing. I've been inside. I cut with a cutter the base of the construction, then I collapse. This work, I need to say, have this strong connection with the performance. The performance are very influenced by the Gutai group, who emerged from the terrible experience of the Second War by dissolving the boundaries between art and life. The performance of Saburo Murakami made a big impression on me when he breaks the paper screen with his body. This immersive and aggressive gesture is different for me from Lucio Fontana gesture. And Murakami take the gesture more to the limit with his body, movement, action in space.
I think we have an image for him. I don't know if it's the next one. Keep going, sorry.
And yeah, and this performance really was this sensation that my work in some points is really about process, talks about, you know, the cycle of life that I consider that is a very natural process. For me, many times it's very difficult to talk about death. I prefer to talk about transformation, the idea that everything is cyclical and transforming another thing. And in this case, the walls, I paint the walls with the different colors. And then when I collapse, I cut before, and then when I collapse, the colors inside came out to outside, and this building came down. And before was very geometrical construction, because this picture is only in the moment when the piece will collapse. And now it's very abstract and it's very monumental.
Let's go to the next one.
Okay.
Uh,
This
yeah.
this is good. This image is good in comparison to the other one, because the other one was Manifesta. That performance is the moment when many people start to talk about me in the international level. Actually, after that performance, I decided to leave Portugal. And then after that performance, Cecilia Lemani invited me and my two artists to be in his thesis, and was in Artist Space in New York, Soho. And I did this piece. This is in New York, in Soho, in Artist Space, where I did the same. I did a construction. Then I kept the basis of the construction in a kind of Gordon Matta Clark style, but not is the same. Then I collapse the building, and then I take away all this building who collapse, and we have only these marks, these traces in the space. What is beautiful for me, pieces like this, is pieces that invite you to be inside. You can walk inside of these memories, inside of these marks. You can touch, you can smell. It's very fragile, and I really think my work have that perception or that connection with the mirror. That mirror, that fragility is like a mirror, or the mirror that have connection with our skin and with our mortality.
Let's look at the. I want to see the image. Yeah, that's what for me is a. I mean, seeing this image and seeing your work, I think there is a, you know, the words almost like no, I understand when I saw that when we were preparing, you know, your color choices, you know, these colors that we see again that are almost invisible when we see a building collapsing. We don't pay attention to these walls that are full of memories and drama and joy and people who live there between these walls, and now we're just left with the colors.
I think so many artists really have this kind of concept in their work. Goda Mata Clark, but another ones, because it's really a very powerful idea. I have a lot of. I've been in that in 2002. I've been travel in Portugal, Caldas da Rainha, Torres Vedras, Lisboa, in many different cities, try to find these kind of buildings and take pictures. I'm very obsessed with this, and the difficulty, the difficult part of this reality is to formalize this concept in something. In some point, I really think when we are working in something, and at some point we have one moment and that looks impossible to continue that journey. But that moment is the moment when the work start working, not before. That always is how I look this kind of process, that many times you have moments that is so difficult. And I remember this view, I have a lot of pictures about this reality around of Portugal or whatever, and I start to think, well, how I can materialize this. And my work, I really think non talks about, you know, Africa or Latin America. I really think the base of my work is the fragility of buildings in Portugal, you know, the public buildings, and that I think have that connection when I start working with my work. And also my social houses and other houses that I mean, that in some point you start to, it's like a puzzle, you start to connect everything. But at some points, everything looks sense, and it's like you go slowly by slowly to grow up a kind of this language, this concept, this object. At some point, go in the same journey, you know. And this
Let's.
image is Lisbon. This image is in Lisbon. That
Mhm.
I mean, Carlos da Rainha look for the newspaper, and I saw in the newspaper in that day that one building collapsed in Lisbon. I
Mhm.
take the bus, travel to Lisbon to the next day, and I came to this place because they put the dress, and now I have the newspaper with me and also this. But I was very obsessed with this news and with this, you know, this fragility in buildings in Portugal.
Let's go to the next one. That's a building which is not fragile. This is a strong building. I'm very. I mean, it's a great image. It's of course of course for people who have not been to the museum. First, you should. Second, this is the entrance of Serralves. So that's the piece that you did for us a few years ago, already 8, 9 years ago. I love the title. It's my favorite word in Portuguese because it's a double meaning, now and public space, which I think is what a museum of contemporary art should be. It's a public space about now. Tell us what you did here and how you, because it's a, you went, you were talking earlier on about architect as God. Here you are confronting yourself, you are really at confronting yourself with one of the gods.
Yes, because the Caesar, yes. Um, you know, I not totally agree about your first expression that here is a safe building. I
Okay.
think, I, I think, I
It's
really
fine.
think, I really think the fragility and the ephemerality always is present. I think in some point the fragility is something that when we see is logical, when we don't see is invisible. But
Mhm.
there, this fragility always is there. In some point is when we see a wall that start to break, we go to put this uh, correct again. But always the idea about time always is present. In this installation,
Mhm.
it's very important to talk about this because my work, because you see cardboard, you say, well, this is fragile. The Caesar building, the building looks very strong. What is the difference? The temporality of these buildings that I make, it's more abrupt and you can be more visible. The temporality of this building is more slowly, but still there. You know,
Mhm.
and also my performance when I collapse the buildings, I really love the idea that I accelerate in a very proposal way the temporality of the objects.
I actually I totally agree with you about the fragility. But I look at it maybe in a different, less material way. And I think the pandemic has really increased this feeling of this awareness, and your piece in a way does that too. This agora, and for me it's connected to the dual meaning of the name, is what we do in a museum of contemporary art today. I think for many reasons, because of the pandemic, because of the historical situation of the world, the rise of a form of populism, extreme populism, makes we do in a museum dedicated to ideas, unfamiliar ideas,
Mhm.
extremely vulnerable. So yes, the building is solid, but the values that I think your work show us, and the values of a museum of contemporary art are, if we don't pay attention, if you're not alert, if we are not committed, the values of what we stand for are fragile. And today more than ever, I look at so many of my colleagues across the world, they're closed. Not for the pandemic, but the value, the philosophical value, the political value that museums stand for are extremely fragile. I see the clock is turning, so I want to continue to show more of your work.
I want to say one thing about Serralves project, sorry, again.
Sorry, let's go back.
Important because the title Agora, I want to say that when I arrived here in the museum, in this entrance, something take a lot of attention in this building. Mm-hmm. When we are in the space, in this area, the entrance for the galleries, on the top, we have the word museum. Mm-hmm. And I make questions. For Caesar, where start the museum? This entrance for the galleries? Or is all this lobby, the entrance of the museum, the city? For me, it was strange that word museum in the entrance of the galleries, because that entrance looks for me in that moment that there start the museum, and for me it's a mistake, and that helped me to put the title of Agora, public space, in this installation. And another thing that is interesting is I decided not to make like a sculpture in the center of this space. It's a very big installation, but very open, that you can cross this installation, can go to the library, to the restrooms, to the restaurants, but it's very open, very democratic, with this intention to be this agora or this public space to everyone.
Mm-hmm. I remember actually you saying that. Remind me of something, a long conversation I had a few years ago with a friend and a colleague in New York, Adam Weinberg, who runs the Whitney Museum, and it was before they were about to move the Whitney from the Marcel Breuer iconic building to another location, and he was saying, well, everybody is fighting me because I'm leaving the iconic building, the beautiful, and the Breuer building is like the Caesar building. It's beautiful. It's like a jewel of a building. And he was telling me, but the museum, it's not bricks, it's not mortar. The museum is an idea. The museum is an ideal. And this, I think, is the ideal that you compact in this word, agora. I want to show more. So maybe we, because we saw one a bit like that. So maybe I would love for us to have time, or that I would like you to talk about, because like you're in a church. So like you talk about museum, but not like you're in a church. So talking about gods.
This is Capella is the name of this installation. This is in Barcelona. The church is part of the Macba Museum. They make a such specific project here. I love this project because I really feel that everyone, guilty people, different color people, everyone could be inside of this church. And it's very beautiful concept. Then I decided to make a piece that have the same size of the building. I think it's very important, and for me the contrast between this very spirituality building, these very strong walls, if you want to talk, who contrasted with this very monumentality construction, but it's very, it's fragile, but it's very strong, have connection with the church, and really, when the people being inside, the sensation was really strange, because normally these kind of installations, it's very you have a very big contradiction how your brain assimilate the information, because looks fragile for the material, but looks so stable in reality. And you still this in between that I really think it's so interesting for me, and also for me to make this project inside of this space, this very spiritual space is very nice, because talk about this new church, this new perception. I don't know. We have so many different layers. In the day of the openings, I invited the Castellers. I don't know if you know what is the Castellers. It's this very big tradition in Catalonia that a lot of people together goes inside each other.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And we invited, came a lot of people. The entrance of the museum, the opening of this, a lot of people made this performance who with these towers made this, a lot of people come down, then they make kind of different towers with the body.
Pyramids.
Yes,
Pyramids of bodies.
And inside you have another kind of this elevation, this very fragile with cardboard. And the metaphor with all these people with their bodies, this construction with cardboard, this connection with the spirituality, I think it's very beautiful.
And the monumentality.
And monumentality, yes.
You know that you mentioned Mata Clark. You know, Mata Clark had a play on the word monumentality. Instead of monumental, he used the word non-humantal. So instead of N-O-N, so non-humantal. To collapse the notion of monumentality. Let's move to the next one. That was in Chicago, yeah. Maybe we move, if you don't mind. Yeah, I would like you to talk about this one because, like, we've seen the verticality. Now we have to go horizontal.
Yeah, my work some years ago, I spent 3 months in the desert in Tucson. I travel by car to Arizona, to Grand Canyon, New Mexico, whatever, hours and hours by car. And that trip changed some concepts in my work. The perception about the scale, to understand the minimalist sculptors, Robert Smithson's, land art, whatever, to understand that sculptors, not only in the theoretical sense, but feel in the physicality, you know, that thing that the landscape was so big, it was so small, bring to me a very strong perception about monumentality and about horizontality in some points. After that residence in Tucson, and this residence, I start to make some work that is very minimal. Could be a line in the wall, could be installation in the ceiling, could be pieces like this, a lot of cardboard in the floor, and evaluate this very, this connection with the minimal arts, Carl Andre, all these artists. And in this case, the installation in Mocha, Toronto, I did it last year. Actually, before this pandemic, I just arrived in Barcelona just in time before to this lockdown. But the title of this piece it calls Occupy. I did this installation that all the space, and I assimilate all these columns in these buildings, Then the people, I put the title Occupy with the very purpose that the people can walk around, or if the people want to be inside, they need to take the shoes. And that for me is very important because it's a kind of a ritual that connects with this, like the Buddhism or the Islamic culture, some very different sensation about or Occidental perception, to take the shoes.
And sign of respect.
And you can walk and you can decide it where you can be inside or not. You choose what kind of directions you can go. And I really think it was a very powerful and beautiful piece with this monumentality and with this title, with Occupy. That was very important. My first pieces, like Cursal projects, the title was in connection with the building. But then I start to make titles more in connection with the concept than with the construction that I will make in the space. The title and the concept came more and more and more important. And in this case, yes, the people have this possibility to walk inside of the piece. And in Toronto, when came this pandemic, this image came in so many newspapers because the connection with this lockdown was so beautiful, Everywhere was inside of our houses like boxes, and were separated. And was a very beautiful metaphor. Actually, the Toronto project, this one, and the Whitechapel project, I did before the pandemic, and both of them have connections, very beautiful connections with this reality that we live today.
And for me, it brings, and I would like maybe now that we go there, it brings the centrality of the body. So, Diana, maybe I think because we talked about that a bit, you addressed the importance of Mata Clark with you, but I would like to look at the presence of the body, and maybe Diana, we go to the second video. Because I think it addresses a few questions that you have touched upon already. This one, yeah. But that's also what the first monumental work you did for Monumenta. And this work, I think, are somehow connected.
Exactly. This we can talk?
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Okay. This is my project in Whitechapel. At Whitechapel, I did a site-specific installation in which I vindicate the space as a home. I have this idea to make an installation, to invite dancers to interact with the piece, but with the lockdown was totally impossible to travel. And then I decided to invite a dancer. This was not me. This is Dan, who is a dancer that we invited. He's from London, and I invited him to make this performance that he called collapse the piece by himself and not me. It was the first time. In the first moment, it was very difficult for me to accept that. But another point, I thought that we need to adapt to these new circumstances. It's like this, this little share that I make this construction, adapt. I really think in a mental way, you need to have this capacity to adapt to these new circumstances. And and because the travel restrictions to COVID, I was unable to return to Whitechapel, and then yes, I invited the dancer to collapse. I'm very interested in the idea of the body. The body always is present in my work. Not only my body, but the body of the people also. I really love in this performance with Dan this sensation that everything is in movement. The body of the dancer, the body of the architecture, everything is in movement, and have this, this sensation of transformation. And it's a kind of dance together in some point. And it was the first time that someone did for me because of circumstances. Because I have the idea to make 3 performances around all these months. Because little by little, I have the idea to transform the installation. But was this COVID, we changed, and the last day we did, because I'm very decided to transform the piece, and I found this solution. And actually, I'm very happy because this brings a new step to the work.
So here we have Saburo Murakami that you mentioned before, the Gutai movement. But let's continue a bit because I want to see Diana. I'm very interested in that, where you have the body and also something that we're going to see, another element that was at Whitechapel. So you walked around London with a chair on your back.
Yes. The concept, and the concept is very important. The concept about my exhibition in London is about the Shakers community. American Shakers movement is insistence on simplicity, and their furniture took me to explore what is necessary and useful in art, architecture, and design. That was something that was very important in this exhibition in Whitechapel. I really love the Shakers because Shakers were farmers. They built their own houses, made their own tools and furniture, following the principles of utility and simplicity. I feel really close of this idea of auto construction and do it yourself. That are some concepts from the Shakers. Also, Shakers used the peg rail. I in the space I put the peg rail around of the gallery. All the
You
gallery
can show the next image. I think that's what it.
exactly. I did the same. I did the peg rail around of the gallery of Whitechapel. To hang tools, objects, and also furniture like chairs. From the space, they make that to transform the space, and when they take a chair and put the peg rail, is to have a free space, in their case, to dance, to pray, to eat, or to make another things. Some gestures that we do today in our houses. Shakers always make this is a share from Shakers. In this exhibition in Whitechapel, I found Shaker shares and I put in the exhibition. It was the first time that I incorporate in the installation also furniture. All the furniture have nails because I'm very interested in this idea about movement of the furniture, movement of the building, movements of the dancers, movement of the public in circulation. Actually, for Whitechapel, I opened before the pandemic. I opened the process to the public. The public in the beginning, January, they saw me and the technicians work in the space, and the people start to ask what go to happen here because they don't have information. They take all a kind of informal performance, and then I did a performance with a chair in my back, the image that we did before. That I decided to make in the middle of the process, because the neighborhood of the Whitechapel Gallery lives in this moment a very big gentrification. Is an area, the neighborhood of Whitechapel still have a little stores and a lot of immigrants. In front of Whitechapel is another neighborhood with these new buildings. It's really big contrast, and I try to use this share, walk around of the neighborhood of Whitechapel in a very proposed way, and I want to put emphasis in this domestic revolution in some point, In some point, the share not is only the question to be at home, the question only to sit, is more than that. Is more than can bring with you, can take a new functions in some point. And
it's
that
interesting also the Shaker, because you're mentioning your experience of the West and the land and art in the land. Don Judd, who, in Marfa, has these huge pieces in the land, was also, I think, very interested by the simplicity of the Shaker design.
No, totally. No. They are amazing. And also, one of the things, some years ago, I did a residence in Long Island with the Watermill Center from the Robert Wilson. And in the place when we eat, have in the wall a lot of chairs in the wall.
Tons.
And for me, it's the first time I said, why these chairs in the wall? And that is the first time that people tell me this reference about the Shakers. And that was so impressive in some point, this idea that you put in the wall, the movement put in the wall, we have more space, was something very, very, very powerful. And in this performance that I call revolution, the domestic revolution, I really love the idea that someone is walking. Actually, I ask some people if they want to sit in a very joke way, but people walk around of this, but in a very it was a very intuitive and very impulsive decision. One day, in the middle of the process, I said, okay, I go to put a chair here, I'm going to walk in the street, but in a very impulsive way. Sometimes we make this decision in a very impulsive way, and really was very amazing experience.
Let's go to the next image, because it's also connected to your experience of the land, I think. Build your own trace. For images, I'm also very happy to, this, as you know, this piece just entered Serralves collection, so I'm super happy about that. And they tell us about those ones, because they are negative sculptures.
Yeah, you talk about the land art sculptures.
Well, I love double negative. Michael Heiser, double negative. I spend a lot of time there. Of course, when I see these works, and I might be totally misunderstanding them, but I cannot not think about Michael Heiser or the next image which is coming after, which is another artist.
This idea about yes, this is very beautiful.
It's pretty good.
Very good.
That's the job.
Yeah, this idea about negative is something that for me also it's very important in my work. Actually, the big installations, I need to say that I don't have drawings before the installations, but when I finish the drawing, when I finish the projects, I make drawings after. And that I call a kind of a negative process or an inverse process. And some point is you make something in a very impulsive way. It's like when you use a paper and make like this, and then you rationalize like that. And then I make drawings after that. I call that is a kind of a negative process. And in this case, I have also the same connection. I live in Barcelona, very close to the beach, and I'm being in the beach, and I start to make these constructions, so these walls in the floor. And it's very simple. I did that, and I take a picture with a proposal to have this negative gesture on the floor in the beach. Yeah.
And then, so let's go to that. Sekine, the next one. It's interesting. You think Gutai. You think, this other movement that comes a little bit after Gutai, Monoha, in Japan, that was also, I think, a precursor of artists being interested in notions that are at the center of many conversation right now, which is Earth, sustainability, and Earth. But let's go to the next one, because it's and I see that I think we have a few minutes left, if you don't mind. But another work that for me that address also these negative spaces, but your relationship both with painting and the perception of painting.
In this case, this work, I love this work. This calls intento de conservación. It's like attempt to conservation. I think we have this obsession about eternity. I think it's one obsession that we have. In this case, we have something that is fragile. It's a kind of painting with cardboard. It's fragile. It's inside of the wall. Then we have these lights, and then we have a glass. The same way how the museums can present a sculptor.
To vitrine.
A kind of a vitrine. Right? This vitrine is one attempt to preserve something that is fragile. The temporality, the concept about temporality is something that is permanent. And what we try to do is to stop and try to conserve this idea about time. That is why I try to make in this work this, inside of the wall with this light, with this glass, to have that sensation about vitrine. And that vitrine is attempt to preserve something that is fragile and is fragile like us. That is one idea that these works I try really to work. Also, the texture of this surface is very organic. I really love, always I talk about the idea about skin. My pieces, the surface of my pieces have connections with the skin. I love the idea when we look for the surface of my paintings. I love the idea that our eyes could be very kind of a microscopic object, and we can see so close all that imperfections. You know, I really love this texture, these imperfections, all these elements. It's very important.
Asperities.
Exactly, it's important, and in some point, I really think this work in this kinds, this work are really in some point the idea behind this work is this talk about this obsession that we have about eternity. In some point, we have panic to lose the memory. The sensation of lose the memory is to put us in a place that was not comfortable. It's really very scary,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And because that we have the museums, we have the mausoleums. Because we have the museums and we have the mausoleums. This is, we have
It's not the same. Not the same. Not the
exactly
same.
what I said. That museums, mausoleums, contemporary museums is all very
When
different.
the museum become a mausoleum, we need to close the door. It needs to be alive. Even if it's an archaeological museum, it needs to be connected to the agora.
To the agora, exactly. And this work, I think it's very beautiful. I think in my work always this concept about painting, about memory, about eternity, about a mirror, that the work is like a mirror of our image, of our mortality, of our skin. The texture always is present, and it's very important. Also, the idea about fragment is something that for me it's very important. The fragment concept. I love for example, the Greek sculptors. When we don't have a leg, you know, that fragment, the sculptor without a leg, we in the very constant way, we can see the leg, but the leg was not there.
Mm-hmm.
It's another concept that many times is in my work in some point to talk about these fragments. And yes, I think in this case, in this specific piece, this idea about memory, or also when I look for this piece, the light is like a kind of a hope at some point, you know, a hope about, you know, to accept the mortality, accept the fragility, accept the imperfections, accept all these life elements that always is around us and connect with us.
Well, I think these are beautiful words to bring a close to our conversation. I'm also very happy to say that this work is now in you trust Serralves with this work, and it has entered the collection. And actually, we are planning to install it in a presentation of the collection in September. So you will hear from us, because I'm sure we're going to ask you how do we make it happen. It's a 7:30 where we are. It's 8:30 where you are, and you're right. We are obsessed with time. So I think I want to thank you for your time. I know also that you have a lot of projects coming up. I think you have one coming very soon in Vienna at the where is it in Vienna?
In succession.
At the cessation. So we look forward to seeing that. I really want to thank you for your generosity, your words, and more importantly, your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for giving this opportunity to talk with you about my work, and for the Portuguese audience. For me, it's very important, and I'm very happy.
And I look forward to see you here. Come and see us. And I could have talked 2 more hours with you, but I think we have. It's Friday night, and I think people wants to go. They might want to go have a drink.
Okay, me too. That is great.
Great. Carlos, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, my team at Serralves, Diana, everybody, Diana Cruz, Medri Tenta, João Carvalho, everybody who made this talk happen. And Carlos, one day we're going to meet in person.
Well, when one of these days in June, I will be in Portugal.
Okay, let me know.
Because I will have a solo exhibition in Vera Cortes, that is my Portuguese gallery, and we'll be there. Maybe we can see you.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you so much. Have a great weekend. Thank you,
Thank you so
Carlos.
much. Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.